Hey guys, it's Mike here, and welcome to another edition of Dragon Ball Super reviews and predictions, where I'm going to be talking about Dragon Ball Super episode 47, reviewing it, and then giving my predictions for episode 48. Well, a lot of stuff happened on the newest episode of Dragon Ball Super, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So, without further ado, let's get started. So essentially, in this episode, we got to see the story unfold of future Trunks and his return to Dragon Ball Super. We got to see his future, the dystopian post-apocalyptic world that he is now living within, and essentially what was going on within it. And we're introduced to the stakes and overall ideas of what's going to happen in this current arc. The future is once again at threat under the terror of this villain named Black, and Bulma is desperately working to try and create more time machine fuel so Trunks can go back in time and find a way to defeat Black in their current future, and once again bring peace to the future timeline that Trunks brought peace to when he killed Cell and the androids. And as we could tell, considering the fact that Trunks and the others flee from this character throughout the episode, they're incredibly outmatched, and this character is clearly more powerful than anything else Trunks at least has faced in the past, including the androids or Cell. But as Trunks and Bulma are plotting to go back in time to undo what has happened or to fix what has happened, discussing how the amount of fuel that they've built up over the course of the past year has only been enough for a one-way trip to the past, and Bulma assures Trunks that he can come back to the future, their secret base is attacked by Black. And shockingly, this Black takes a hold of Bulma, and Trunks is forced to retreat in order to survive their encounter, seemingly leaving Bulma to her death. After Trunks escapes, he finds the home of Mai, and that is the Mai from the Pilaf gang, as we saw in Dragon Ball and again in Dragon Ball Super after they were introduced in Battle of Gods. And it appears, as was hinted in the first two films, although it wasn't hinted at in Dragon Ball Super the show, Mai and future Trunks are in a relationship right now, and both of them are trying to go to the past. After Trunks reveals what happened at their secret base and about how now they have the fuel to go back in time with the one-way trip, they make their way over to Capsule Corp. But before they can enter, their way is barred as Black appears once again, having sensed Trunks had followed him there. Trunks tells Mai to go on ahead and tries to stop Black himself, but is overpowered. Mai then tells Trunks she'll act as a decoy while Trunks goes and flees to the past, but as she attempts to hold off Black, she is hit by one of his blasts and killed in the process. As Trunks yells at this Black in a rage, the smoke finally parts to reveal that this in fact is Goku, an evil version of Goku from Trunks' time. And to close out the episode, we hear the words from his mouth, "It's the day you'll take your final breath, Saiyan." And that's essentially what happened in this newest episode of Dragon Ball Super. Now, there was some other stuff that happened I didn't cover, but I'll get into that in my pros and cons for this episode. But first off, let's start with the pros. Naturally, my first and foremost pro that I really like is that future Trunks has returned to Dragon Ball Super and Dragon Ball as a franchise. Ever since he left at the end of the Cell Saga and we saw his story wrap up, I always wanted to know, well, what happened to Trunks after that? What happened after he killed Cell in his future timeline? And finally, we're finding out more, and we're returning to that future timeline in that post-apocalyptic world. And that also ties into another pro. I really like the atmosphere and the overall tone of this post-apocalyptic future that Trunks comes from. It's such an interesting change of pace from the current timeline, where death doesn't really make any difference, but in Trunks' timeline, it's steeped with tension, drama, and the fact that death actually matters and has consequences. As we saw in this episode, it seems like two characters that were just reintroduced in this episode with future Bulma and future Mai are both now dead. And as we know, everyone else seems to be dead as well, and the entire reason why Trunks is going back to the past is to stop what has happened and to somehow, I guess, reverse what has happened in his future. So immediately with this episode, right off the bat, when they started talking about Trunks needing to get that fuel and go back to the past, we automatically are presented with our stakes for what has to happen to save the future and for Trunks to go back to the past and his motivation to do so, which is something that a lot of people have questioned speculation ever since this was announced, because the fact that everyone said, oh, it's simply fan service to get Trunks to go back to the past, and while in some ways it might be to appeal to future Trunks and his big fan base that certainly exists out there, myself included, the fact of the matter is that we're already presented with a sort of drama that really Super has sorely been missing thus far, and that's certainly a pro for me. I also really like the attempt to further humanize and make us sympathize with future Trunks as a character. The fact that he is now in a relationship with Mai in the future. The fact that because they live in such a post-apocalyptic future with very little resources, they barely ever eat. So when Mai presents Trunks a can of food that is not quote-unquote dog food, he is relieved to find this out. Furthermore, he only eats half of it and presents the rest to Mai, who herself seems to have not eaten in a very long time at this point, which further reintroduces the audience to the fact that this character is truly a good person and a real human being. And we even see that Trunks is in utter sorrow at the fact that it appears that his mother was killed by Black. And one of the things that has always annoyed me about certain members of the Dragon Ball community is the fact that they always try and say that Trunks is a quote-unquote whiny bitch, or that Trunks simply complains and whines too much. And this shows a complete and utter lack of understanding of the character. If you lived in a world and an environment where every single person you know was murdered in front of your eyes, or murdered in general, and you live in a world where you are the only hope, and death really has consequences, they can't simply wish everyone back, how are you going to react? Every reaction that we see from this character completely humanizes him and makes us understand that even though he is super powered and comes from a fictional universe, he is still supposed to be a human being and someone with emotions and someone who would react the same way that a normal human being would react given these circumstances. So the more emotion and the more moments like this we see from future Trunks, the better in my eyes, because we barely get to see that with any other character on the show, save for, say, Vegeta and Gohan. Two characters who continue to be minimized in the show. I additionally like the lore building in this episode that had to deal with the Omni King, as Beerus and Whis help to establish further how much more powerful he is than literally every other character on the show, and how he is the most powerful character there is in general in Dragon Ball, and probably ever will be, considering the fact that he's able to destroy universes in the blink of an eye. As they reveal, there used to be 16 universes in total, but because the Omni King became unhappy for whatever reason, he ended up destroying 4 of them. I also feel that the episode had really good animation, especially in the future Trunks segments, and finally, to wrap up my pros, I thought the execution surrounding the evil or Black Goku in this case was very well done. I don't really like the idea, and I've never liked the idea of an evil Goku, because really I think it goes against the idea of the character, and it does kind of delve a little bit into that fan fiction, but the fact of the matter is, execution is really key, and I'm just gonna wait and see how it plays out, because even though I don't like the idea and think it's just dumb in general, if in the end it's done well, it's only for the benefit of this show. Now as for my cons, right off the bat I have to say that I did not like the entire subplot or everything revolving around the main timeline in this episode. I thought it was completely esoteric and completely unneeded, and really it detracted from the overall episode as a whole, because it detracted from the tension, the stakes that were going on in future Trunks' timeline, because we kept going to the present and seeing all of these happy-go-lucky, tensionless moments of levity and humor, which are completely unnecessary in a series kind of format, because you could simply have episodes like that or moments like that in other episodes further establishing what's going to happen. Most of it had to do with them establishing the fact that Goku and Vegeta are still training and talking about this upcoming Omniversal tournament, but we know that's not going to happen in this arc, so there's literally no reason to remind the audience of this or talk about this or fixate on it so much when they could simply do that after this arc is over. It really was pointless, and it took away from the time that the future Trunks storyline could have had to further develop him, his character, and all the stakes that are going on in the future. With that being said, I thought that the future stuff did need some more time, as in some ways it was sort of rushed. For example, the fact that Bulma kinda seems to die off screen, and there's no real explanation as to Mai and Trunks' role, how they got together, or anything like that. They simply are together at the start of the episode when we see them. Even though we know the stakes and we see tension stuff coming from future Trunks' timeline, the fact of the matter is that they could have devoted far more time to explanations and explaining things to the audience that we really need to know coming away from this episode and going into the future Trunks arc. Also, two things I knew they weren't going to explain this episode and really should have had an explanation. Number one, why is Trunks' hair blue? And number two, how is Mai the same age as Trunks or seemingly still young in the future timeline when the Pilaf gang wished for immortality right before Battle of Gods, and the only time it seems like they could have wished for immortality was before Piccolo's death, which would seemingly make Mai much older than Trunks is right now. This is another moment in the episode that they simply could have explained, but they decided to spend time with Goku and Vegeta doing pointless things in the past that was completely irrelevant to the plot at hand. And finally, I think that this episode really should have just been one self-contained episode in which we saw Trunks, his stakes, his future, find out exactly what the endgame is of this arc, and have Trunks end the episode by escaping to the past. I didn't think it was necessary for this to have a cliffhanger as Trunks going to the past and meeting back up with Gohan, Goku, Vegeta, whoever would ultimately be a more than adequate ending. The fact of the matter is that the way the episode ended really shouldn't have been the way the episode ended, and the story of future Trunks escaping to the past could have easily been a single episode had they excised all of the esoteric padding with Goku, Vegeta, Beerus, and Whis. So overall, those are my thoughts on Dragon Ball Super episode 47. I still think it was a good episode, and I still really enjoyed every single element of future Trunks and his time in the future, but I thought it was completely unnecessary to have everything else in this episode, and really detracted from it in the end. Now, with all that being said, let's get into my predictions. As we saw in the next episode preview, future Trunks seems to somehow make his way to the present main timeline. And once he's there, we seem to be seeing a lot of explanation as to likely who he is in relation to other characters. We see the Pilaf gang are there in the present, we see them looking at Trunks' timeline with the hope symbol on it, and we see the present current timeline Trunks himself, and it appears in this episode they explain to him who this other future Trunks is, going by the look on his face in this one shot. And as the episode is called, Hope Again, Trunks wakes up in the present, so it's likely that Trunks is going to wake up in this episode, explain to everyone what happened in his future, why everything is kind of the way it is, and explain to Goku about this Black Goku character. Now, I haven't seen Gohan at all in this next episode preview, and I really hope that he's going to be in this episode. They're not just going to write him off in yet another arc, which is going to really piss me off because, again, Gohan was the most powerful character at the time when Trunks left, so there's literally no reason to write him off and just make this again the Goku and to a lesser extent the Vegeta show, but we'll have to see what happens. And of course, Goku says, "Whoa, future Trunks got beat up by someone named Black who looks just like me. Alright, Vegeta and I will go to quickly face him." So that seems to imply to me that they're going to try and go to the future in this arc, and I did talk about that in another video on my channel, which you can go check out right now. But ultimately, I hope that it's not going to be yet another Goku versus Goku or Goku versus the main villain show, and we actually get to see another change in dynamic, which is accompanied by the coming of future Trunks once again, just as it happened in the Cell Saga when everything got shifted by Trunks being a Super Saiyan. But overall, this has been my review and predictions for episode 47 and episode 48. Let me know your own thoughts down below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Subscribe.
Do it now. What do you wait?
Do it now, you puny man. Who cares about the universe 654 321?
Blah.
I'm from the universe of biceps. Wow.